Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Ampar. I'm the Director of Product Management here at Cpine Software. I'd like to welcome you to our third Lunch and Learn. This one's on load testing in QA Wizard Pro. Load testing, as you might guess, is one of our most requested feature additions to QA Wizard Pro, so I'm really excited to talk to you all today and let you see what we've been working on and how you can get your hands on it. Before we jump into how load testing works in detail, I wanted to step back for a second and let you understand what our goals were for this addition to QA Wizard. The first thing is just to define what we mean when we talk about load testing is obviously for web load testing, you're trying to simulate lots of users at the same time accessing your web application. So it's important to understand this is web-only load testing. This isn't for any other kinds of applications. But with that said, the goal from a tester standpoint is a couple of things. First, we want to help you understand how your website behaves under load. So hopefully it doesn't, but does it crash when you get too large a load? Does it start returning error pages to users? Does it slow down the same for everyone, or does it degrade only for the new people in, or only for the people that have been in for a while? So helping you understand what are the characteristics of your website as the load starts ramping up. In addition, to try to help you understand where the bottlenecks are. So are you starting to run out of memory so your server gets slow because of that? Are you using your CPU heavily so you know that you'd be well served by improving the processor that's in the box you're running your server on? Are you network bound, or do you run out of database connections? So again, trying to help you understand what your application's behavior is when it's under load. So those were the things we were trying to help you accomplish when we added the features to QA Wizard Pro. Very briefly, from a highlight standpoint, we've added all this functionality into the core QA Wizard Pro product. So this is not a new product. It's a part of the core product and takes advantage of all the rest of QA Wizard that you may be used to using. What that means is there's nothing additional to install. So if you install QA Wizard, you have load testing. Certainly when you install the new version, you have load testing. So there's no additional download, no additional install of any kind. There's about 20 new statements that we'll actually look at in some detail today, go through what those are and help you understand how those statements work and how they interact with the scripts you'll be writing. There's some new reporting options that we'll take a look at. Load testing can generate quite a lot of data. So we want to make some of that available right within the reports and also make all of it available offline so that you can do any sort of detail analysis you want to do once you finish some load tests. And there's a new screen we'll take a look at to let you configure load tests. There's a fair number of options when you run a load test that you need to set up initially, and so we're going to spend a little time looking at how you configure a load test when you start using the product. As I mentioned, it's part of the core product. Every QA Wizard license includes 5 free licenses for load testing. That means you can simulate up to 5 simultaneous users on that machine or a remote machine. And the idea there was to let everyone make sure that QA Wizard's load testing functionality was going to work in your environment with your website, so you don't have to invest anything in addition to understand how this might help you. Beyond that, you can purchase blocks of 50 virtual user licenses. So this lets you, if you only need to test potentially an internally facing application, you might only need 100 or 150 to simulate a good load, as opposed to maybe something that's externally facing or focused at a larger install base where you might need 500 or 750 or some large number. So you can add additional licenses. These are just virtual user licenses. They're not additional licenses of QA Wizard that you need just for these virtual users. And they act more like a floating license in that if you buy 250, you can be running multiple load tests at the same time, one using 125 of those, another one using 100, and a third one running 25. So you don't have to buy all these virtual user licenses for all the different boxes you might want to do that on. I have here, you may need additional runtime licenses. Really, this depends on your environment and what kind of testing you want to do. So if you currently have some dedicated boxes that you're doing functional and regression testing on, you may not want to also run load testing tests on those if those are going to be running for a long period, or it's a relatively low-end box and you want your load test boxes to be more high-end so they can simulate lots and lots of users. So depending on your exact configuration, you may choose to buy additional runtime licenses. There's absolutely no requirement to use load test. Load test scripts are almost the same as normal QA Wizard scripts. There's a few differences, though. They support all the standard QA Wizard language constructs for looping and doing data-driven testing and all the normal things you would expect to do in a QA Wizard script. You can call other scripts, do checkpoints, etc. The biggest thing that you can't do is you can't touch the user interface. So your scripts can't click on things, select items in the user interface, because we're not really using the user interface. What we're doing is driving the network so that your machine looks like lots of users talking to the server. But in order to do that, we can't be clicking 50 times at the same time or typing into 50 windows at the same time. So any statements that have to do with touching the user interface aren't allowed. And so what will happen is if you try to use those statements, you won't be able to run that as a load script. You can only use the sort of general statements and these specific load testing statements that we'll look at here in a minute. So with that said, let's jump right into some of the new statements and the new statement areas to give you a feel for how this works. The first big area is around the context. So certainly today in all your scripts, you normally start them off with a set context, and that lets us understand what application are you planning to use in the repository. There's an equivalent one for load test called set load test context, and this is a great flag that we use to know that this is a load script as opposed to a regular one. Like a normal QA Wizard script, when we see this, we load in all the repository variables that you can use. The big difference being if you have any that are prompting the user for values, we can't do that in a load script, so we're just going to pull in the default values, but you can still manipulate them and use any repository variables. The most important one being the URL root repository variable that we can replace at runtime into the URL to the server. And just for consistency's sake, there's a clear load test context. If you wanted to have one script that went against different applications, you can clear that out and start it over again. So this sort of sets the context for any load script, and most load scripts would start with a set load test context in them. There's another set that have to do with web agents and referrers. So web agents are what browser that you are going to claim that you are. So typically this is set automatically by the browser you use. If you're using Firefox, it sends up what version of Firefox it is, IE, Chrome, etc. So there's a statement for you to tell us what one you want to be, but unlike a normal QA Wizard script where we're actually going to use that browser, in this case this is just what we're telling the server we are, so you can really claim to be any browser you want. We include a bunch of constants for the standard ones for lots of versions of IE and Firefox, Chrome and Safari, but if there are custom ones you want to set up, you can certainly set those up yourself to do that. And the biggest reason is if your web application does different things for different browsers. So for example, if you don't support IE5 on your web application and you have a special page that encourages people to upgrade to a newer browser, you might want to include that in the mix so that you're touching that part of the code on the server as a normal mix of the sets of things the server is going to see at any one time. You can also get the current user agent in your script, so if you have lots of scripts that call each other and you want to know what it's currently set to so you can do some different logic in your load test scripts, you can retrieve it. The refer is something that's set up with a web request header, and it tells it where this request was at before, what was the website that referred it to it. And you can manually set that again if you want to simulate people coming in, maybe from a Google ad campaign you've got or from some other internal portal, but you don't want to actually start there and load your portal up. You can instead set the referrer so that you look like you're showing up in the normal way for your website. And again, similarly, you can get what the current referrer is. And most normally you probably won't use this or only use this occasionally, but there are certainly specific scenarios where you need to either set the referrer or get the current one to do some different processing. We have a couple of statements that have to do with cookies. The first one is web set cookie that lets you set values into the cookie that the website's going to exchange with it. It's a pretty simple statement that takes the name of the value you want to set in the cookie, the value you want to set it to, what web URL that cookie should be associated with, and whether it should be used for all URLs associated with that or just that specific one. So again, if you're using cookies, if you need to do something in your script specifically to manipulate the cookie, that's what this is for, as well as you can get values out of the cookie if you need to look at something that the server may have sent back to you and you want to validate that you're in the right mode or it's sending you the right information. Now we sort of get to the real heart of the matter, getting and setting data with the server. So all those other things, the set contacts and manipulating the cookie, were really to set things up for you to now start loading the server. And there's three statements we're going to look at here that have to do with that. The first has to do with getting data, and that's the web get statement. It takes a URL to get data from. It takes a variable number of parameters that you might pass up as well as part of that web get. If the URL is a relative one, that is, it just starts with a slash, then we'll assume that we should add the URL root property to the end, to the beginning of it, so you don't have to record the full URL for everything. And when we record load scripts, we take advantage of that as well. We send up the last refer as part of that, so if you set that refer or we record that as part of the script, that'll be sent up, as well as the cookie, of course, is sent up. You can include parameters directly in the URL as well as in that variable list at the end there. And it's really your choice where you put them. If they're more static values, you may want to include them in the URL. If they're ones you're calculating or maybe creating on the fly randomly, then you may want to include them in those parameters to make it clear that's what you're sending up. And the result of the get is returned to you as a string. And we're going to talk about the result after we talk about the other data connection statements here in a second. You can see there's two versions of it here, one where I'm specifying the whole URL in the first one and two specific parameters, and then the other one I'm using a relative URL, so it'll use that URL root property, and we're using a case where we're actually putting a parameter right in the URL because we're always going to log in as guests under this script. The other two statements have to do with posting data. So getting data from the server. This is posting data to the server. The first form looks pretty similar. It takes a URL and a variable number of arguments. Like before, that URL can be a relative one or an absolute one, and we'll use the URL root property if it's a relative one. The last refer and cookies are sent along. Like before, you can include parameters right in the URL or add variables, and we return the result back to you after that. So this is to push data up, and you'll see when you record scripts, most of the statements are going to be web gets and web posts. There's a second form of web posts called web post from file, and this is so that you can post up binary data. So if you've got a website that lets you upload files or images, etc., this is the first version you can use. And again, pretty similar, except it takes a file that's going to have all the content of it. And when we record scripts, you'll see that if we see that it's got binary data associated with it or form data, then we'll automatically create a post data file for you, but it's just a text file, or it's just a file that you specify, and we'll upload it up when you call this statement. For either web get or web post, we look at the response from the server to try to figure out whether we should continue on normally, record an error, or stop the script right there. So first of all, of course, if we can't contact the server at all, if there's a connection failure, then we record an error and we stop right there in the script. If the status response from the web server is in the 200 range, we treat all of those as a success and we continue on normally and give you back the result. If it's in this lower 300 range, those are all various forms of redirecting, and we consider all of those safe, and we'll just, again, continue on with the request and re-request the page with the new URL that was returned to us. A 304 is another kind of response that says we should use the value in our cache. Since we're not really a browser and we don't really have a cache here, we treat this as a warning, but we do continue on because the server has responded normally, but in sort of a special way that's unique, and we want you to know about that because it's a use your cache, I'm not going to give you the data kind of response. Any other response we treat as an error, and we stop the script right away. And when we record those errors or warnings, you'll see we put in both the direct code we got as well as any description that came with the error code as well. As I mentioned, both WebGet and WebPost return a string of the data they got back. We pull out the header and status code information and give you just what's in the body of the script. Now, often, probably almost always, that content will be HTML, and you can use several of the other existing statements we have in Query Wizard to look at that. So HTML find by ID, find by tag, look at regular expressions and substrings. So you can use any of those because it's a normal string of data, if that's what it's sent back as HTML, to parse and validate that what you got back is what you expect. And we do that, any of the types that come back that claim to be text or text-like things, and I list a bunch of the examples there, will return back as a string. If it claims to be something else, we assume it's binary. We still give you that data in the result there, but under most circumstances, there's not much that you're probably going to be able to do in Query Wizard with it. But we do return it if there was some processing you could do after the fact. So if it's an image or something else, we do return it to you. So if there is some useful processing you can do on it, but we expect most of the time the binary results aren't going to be as useful as the text ones will be. Session variables are a special kind of concept with load tests. As I mentioned here, they're hidden input fields, and they're a pretty common way that websites store session-specific data. So view state for an ASP.NET application, sometimes a session ID is stored in there to identify that you're logged in, other state information. So all of this is information that's dynamic to that specific session, so we need to know to not to send up the current values and not what was recorded. So we've got three statements around that. The first is web add session variable. That lets you tell us what the name of the session constant is going to be, that hidden input field, so that we know to capture the value when we see a new value of it. And then also, whenever we play back anything to the server, webput, webget, webpost, I'm sorry, that we should give the current value, not the value that was recorded. So you'll see in the script, although we record it, what we send up will actually be the dynamic value that we got from the last response from the server that updated that value. We also let you turn that off for a specific one. So there's web remove session variables. If there's a part of the application where you don't want it updated, you're in a special part of your website where you want that thrown away, or you want to use a specific static value. And then there's a web remove all session variables if you have a large number that you need to clear out and start over again with. There's a couple of other statements that we added as part of this that I want to point out. The first two are two new kinds of checkpoints. Checkpoint string exists and checkpoint string not exists. And both of these let you look for a value within a string. So checkpoint string exists lets you say inside this large string, look for this other string, and fail either if it's there or not there, depending on which versions of these two you pick. So obviously especially useful with the webget, webpost result strings if you want to look inside there to see if there's some HTML you expect to be in the page. But you can use it for any kind of script you want. So if you have other scripts that are looking at strings, looking for values inside of strings, these are two convenient new checkpoints we've added in. There's an ignore warnings message to let you suppress warning messages. Load tests often can lead to lots and lots and lots of warning messages, sometimes ones that you expect because of the type of application you've got. So you can actually turn those off so that you don't fill your results back with a lot of warning messages that you know are there. And then just for cleanup purposes, there's a web close connection or web close all connections that you clean things up for your scripts if you want to try to close all the connections down from your side. With that said, I'm going to jump over to Query Wizard and we'll take a look at the product and a couple of the new screens in there. So I'm in Query Wizard Pro, and we're starting off by looking at a pretty normal, this is actually a standard web script I've got here. This is not a load script in any way. It's called Create Course Standard, and this is going against an open source web application called Moodle. So you can see in here I've got a normal set context, run app, and what this script is doing is creating a new course. This is a course management piece of software. So it comes in, it clicks on the login link, sets the password, logs in, clicks on the course link, clicks on the add course, fills in some data, clicks on the Save Changes button, and logs out. So pretty standard QA Wizard script that you've probably recorded and seen yourself. I want to show you what the load test equivalent of that looks like. The first thing I want to mention is you record a load test just like any other kind of script. You go up to the Scripts menu and create Record Load Test. It asks you what application you want to work with, and then you just start using the application. The big difference being we're not looking at all at what you're clicking at on the screen, what you're clicking at in terms of combo boxes or other things. We're only watching what gets sent out from the client to the server and what responses come back. So if your web application has lots of on-screen combos, today you'll see in your normal script lots of selections going on, but in the QA Wizard load script, you'll see just one web post or one get associated with that. On the other hand, the thing you'll see is often a lot of web gets for other things on your page that you may not normally look at. So if we look at our load test equivalent, first of all, we start with a set load test context like we normally do. I've got one of those web add session variables here. There's a ses key value that I know is being used, so I want to say that's dynamic, pull that out. And then I'm calling an external script to do the login. Again, you can do the normal QA Wizard things to call it to external scripts. And I've got that pulled into a separate area so I can reuse login. And then I've got this area blocked off called Get the Category Editing Page. And you'll see a lot of web gets here. So here I'm getting lots of the images that are associated with it. So these are all the things that we recorded getting that page was associated with. So all of these are, again, getting lots of images on the page, and we're setting the refer because that's what we recorded was going on. So lots and lots of web gets that are just getting the surrounding data. Now, certainly there's nothing in our logic that requires you to get that. So if you want to not get those things, you certainly can. We think that is an artificial way to load the server, but if you really want to focus on just posting data to the server and not so much how much it sends you, you can certainly skip doing all the web gets of all the associated images and just focus on the posts. But normally we expect with a lot of load testing scripts, you'll see a lot of these things, you'll want to keep them, so you want to take advantage of this construct we've had in QA Wizard for a while to let you group statements together and hide them easily so they don't sort of fill up the screen with things that don't make a lot of value to the script logic. Here I'm creating a random course ID, so I'm just pulling in, using our random function to pick a course ID between 102 and 110, and then I'm doing a web post. So again, in the normal script, you saw a lot of edits where I was setting text, setting text, setting text. For the web post, that's sort of all wrapped up into one big statement. It often is going to be bigger because all those fields you don't have to fill out that aren't required. The post still sends all that data to the server. So you see in here in the web post lots of statements in there, lots of values being set up. But I've got a dynamic, this course ID, you can see I'm weaving it throughout here because I'm doing this dynamically. You can also see here's that session key web session variable that I defined. So the value we're setting for this is going to be ignored, and we're going to actually use the dynamic one we got back from the server. And I'm capturing the result, and then I do a checkpoint string exists. I know that if the course was made successfully, I ought to see the string course was created successfully in the body of the HTML returned. And I'm also looking to make sure I need the course tag out of it, so I'm using our HTML find by ID to pull out that tag value. You'll often also want to use delays if you want to simulate thinking time. So if you want to not load the server as fast as we can talk to it, but rather focus on a more realistic scenario, you might put in, and here I'm saying delay a random amount between 100 milliseconds to 2 seconds So every time the script gets run, there'll be a random amount of time put in there between when I actually create the course and when I now call my logout. Once I've created a set of scripts, and you can see I have a set of load scripts over here, I pick Run Load Test to actually run it. And this is the biggest new screen in the application. There's several choices of things you can do here. First of all, you tell us how many virtual users you want to simulate in this script, or this run, I should say. Specify the set of scripts you're going to run. So in this case, I've got a mix of creating courses, creating users, and registering for classes. You tell us what mix, either percentage or count, you want those scripts to be used. You tell us what machine should be running these. So again, remote or local, some mix. So I've got 20% running here and 40% running on 2 different other remote boxes I've got. As I mentioned, you can really claim to be whatever browser you want to. So we've got, again, a mix maybe based on what you know your user base is. So I've got 70% running IE8, 15% Firefox 3.5, and 15% Google Chrome. And we've got a bunch of built-in constants that you can put in here as well. Or you can set them programmatically in your script. A lot of times you want to put in some delay before all the users show up. So it might be a little shocking to your server to have 500 users show up all at the same time and instantly start doing something. So you can put in some lag so that the server sees a slow load or build up to its peak value. And then normally when you run at the end, you either have it run for some specific scripts. So this, you might have a loop in the script that you're pulling that's data driven, or you want to specifically do something a certain number of times. Or you can say just keep running all the scripts repetitively for some specific length of time. And here I've got it for 10 seconds. I'm not going to click run right now because it's going to eat up all my network connection and could possibly lose the live meeting connection. When you do that, unlike a normal QA Wizard script, all you're going to see is a status box come up and tell you how many users are currently being simulated, any errors that it's gotten back, and an ability to cancel the script at that point. So it just sort of shows you the status, again, because we're not talking to the user interface at all. When you complete the test, you get a normal report like you'd expect in QA Wizard Pro. And the top part of it looks pretty similar. We tell you what scripts we ran and what all those settings were that I was just looking at. It's got some additional data here, like the total number of page hits and bytes sent and the average response time and maximum response time. If there were any warnings, we would tell you what they were, and we group those up. So again, often there'll be a lot of the same warning again and again. So it might say we had 200 404 errors, a page not found, rather than list all those individually. The big change is at the lower half of the screen, we now bring in some graphs with it. We graph in the virtual user over time, so you can get a feel. Here you can see I was stair-stepping in. I had 10 users over a 5-second period start coming up to my server. I can see my response time. I can see my hits per second and my bytes per second, and also a plot of any errors I had over time. So this gives me a quick, overview of what happened, how it looked. If there was something anomalous right away, if I saw my response time constantly going up, or maybe running just fine and then suddenly spiking up, I can start looking at how that relates to some of the other data I'm collecting. But if you want to dive into the details, we let you export all the data associated with this and bring it over into something like Excel, and I've got Excel running here, and this is every request we sent, every response we got back, when we sent it, what the type of request was, how many bytes we got back, any errors we got back, how many users we're currently running. So now you can go into great detail and try to get a really detailed understanding of what your website is doing at that point. Those are really the key new things. Again, you can record a script normally, play them back normally, and pick them. Just got a couple other things I wanted to cover. As I mentioned, we're adding this as a part of the core QA Wizard product. All licenses are going to be or have 5 virtual user counts associated with them. And we're going to be posting a beta of this in just the next day or so. I'd encourage you to check out some of these additional resources. The Cpine View, our blog entry, is where we post all the videos from these Lunch and Learns. And we'll be posting this one probably late this week or early next week. The The Cpine Labs is where we post sample code and other things like that. That's actually where the beta will be hanging off of. And I always like to point people at the Request a Feature page. That gets routed directly to the product managers, myself included, so we look at every feature request you send in. Don't worry if you think it's a duplicate. We want to hear the feature request that you need for the product. With that said, I'm going to hop over and see if I can't get to a couple of the questions. The first question had to do with think time. I mentioned briefly that concept. You'll see that sometimes with load testing tools, a way to simulate users pausing on a page. So right now, as I mentioned, that delay statement is how we would do that. So you can put that before any web get or web post, or right afterwards to slow the script down to more smooth out the request of the server. And that really depends on, are you really just trying to load the server as fast and as hard as possible, or are you more closely trying to simulate users at the same time and give a realistic feel to it? So that's how you simulate load think time. There's a question about the maximum number of virtual users that can be supported. There isn't a built-in maximum. A lot of it will depend on the specific machine, network configuration, network card, and others that sort of play into that. So obviously a low-end machine with a very low-quality Ethernet card isn't going to be able to simulate many. QA will try and we'll press on as best we can, but it won't put as much of a load as a very high-end machine with a very high-end network card in it. There are limits in the operating system, so depending on which version of Windows you're running, we may or may not be able to open as many connections as you like. We're going to try to provide some guidance when we ship QA load testing, but it is going to sort of depend on your environment, but there's no inherent limit in the product in terms of how many users you can simulate on any particular environment or as an overall test. There's a question that I don't have a specific answer to, but I'll at least try to start an answer to, and somebody's asking about how this relates to maybe some other tools. And you know, I think everyone in this field, myself included, know that people need a variety of tools to do the kind of testing they need. QA is focused on trying to be a good automated testing tool for functional regression and now load testing. There's certainly other tools that focus on other things like capturing server-side data or networking data in more detail. And I kind of try to give you a feel for the data we capture, but that doesn't mean that other related tools that maybe capture related information aren't still of benefit and don't still make sense to use in conjunction with QA Wizard. But really the focus of this is so that using the same scripting environment, scripting tools, scripting language that you already know if you're using QA Wizard, that you can now add load testing into your utility belt of functionality to try to grow on. So I'm not familiar with the specific tool somebody mentioned here. I'll try to do a brief view of that and see if we can't give a more detailed answer of how they might complement each other. But I certainly know that picking the right set of tools, there isn't always just one tool to solve all your needs. There's a question around checkpoints and trying to return the result back so you can do something with it rather than have the script fail. And the answer is right now there isn't a way to do that. If you want to do that, you really now need to do the logic in your script. And I did actually the first Lunch and Learn we did about a month or so ago talked a bit about how you can do that instead of a checkpoint. Do logic to execute a procedure in case of an error condition. And so I'd say check the blogs. We've got a recording of that. It's only about a half hour long that goes into how to use logic in a statement instead of a checkpoint. The beta will be up in just a couple of days, so if you have some time, we'd love to have you take a look at it. Give us your feedback. There's certainly time to try to address issues that you might see in it, but we're really excited about it. There will be an additional Lunch and Learn coming in about 6 weeks or so that will go into some more details and samples, and actually several videos planned in that same time frame to go in detail about how to deal with cookies and session variables and a lot more dynamic data as well. So thanks, everybody, and have a great afternoon.